Already 1/3 of Kenya's energy mix is comprised of geothermal. As investors converge on Nairobi, what are they discussing? Where do they see the potential, and are we likely to see this figure improve?
Yes, the main theme of the conference is for us to try and showcase what we have done so far, and also to showcase the opportunities that there are in the geothermal sector. As you are possibly aware, we only have got about 200 megawatts of installed capacity of geothermal. The potential is about 7,000 megawatts, and we have been very, very dependent on hydro, which forms about 46% of our mix today. And what we are aiming at by 2018 is to convert that, to invest that, such that what we will be depending on about 49% of our power will be coming from geothermal. So it's really to showcase what we have done so far, and also to showcase the opportunities that there are in that huge development that we want to do.
As a company, obviously, you're quite bullish about geothermal energy. Investing in the region of $4.5 billion is what you're hoping to do by the year 2018, driving it through an in-house investment agency. Tell us about your strategy and how you're going to go about it.
Well, our strategy is that we are taking a very open view in terms of the financing. As you have said, we require about $4.5 billion up to about 2018. That's to build another 1,260 megawatts of geothermal. Now, obviously, in the past, we have always depended on the DFIs, the World Bank, the AFD, KfW, EIB, all the DFIs for funding. And our feeling is that we cannot be able now to get all that funding from them. So we are approaching it with a very open mind in terms of, yes, we can do bonds. We may be able to do vendor financing. We may be able to do PPPs. We may be able to do BOO or BOT. Whatever financing options that we can be able to get, which would make it quicker in terms of developing this potential that we have.
Now, it's reported already that you are seeking an initial project with a Japanese company and a Korean company as well. Now, for prospective investors, how do they count the benefits and the costs? Because it's estimated that 1 megawatt of geothermal electricity would cost the investor $10 million in capex. Where would the savings and the benefits be here?
Well, those figures have come down, actually. It's no longer about $10 million. The project that we are doing right now, the one you mentioned with the Koreans and the Japanese, is 280 megawatts of geothermal. And the total cost without the steam, which will be provided by the government funding, is about $1 billion. So if you divide $1 billion by 280, you're talking about $3 million. So the costs have actually come down. And we are looking, because the availability of geothermal is very, very high, and therefore we are looking at that coming out at about 5 US cents of electricity, as compared with the thermals and the other modes of generation that we have, which are much higher than that. We are still hoping that we can be able to bring that down, that cost a little further down. Our aim is to get geothermal at about 3-4 US cents. Which will begin to make a lot of sense in terms of the costs.
Comparatively speaking, how does geothermal compare to hydroelectricity, to fuel-based electricity that we use in other parts of Africa? Where would the benefits be, both for the consumer and also for the investor?
Well, several advantages of using geothermal. First of all, geothermal, as you know, is renewable. It's green energy, and therefore there's no pollution. You're actually reducing on carbon emissions. In terms of hydro, again, you know, sometimes there is a lot of displacement of people when you're building big hydro projects, whereas in geothermal there isn't, because typically where geothermal is found is not areas which are habitated by people. So you can't be able to access geothermal without having to replace the people. And also the fact that now it is becoming cheaper is the same advantage as hydro, for instance. The cost of geothermal is becoming the same as hydro, and there's no fuel cost going forward. So there are quite a few advantages of using geothermal.
Okay, other factors you'd have to look at in terms of making the value maximization assessment is the growth rate in Kenya. Economy growing somewhere in the region of 4.5%. You're almost at maximum capacity in terms of installed electricity and what is on demand. What are your projections for this economy, and what would make investors come into this particular economy?
Well, the growth, the GDP growth, as you say, is about 4%, but the power demand, the peak demand, has been growing at about 8% from about 2003, and therefore we are projecting that by 2018 the peak demand will have risen to about 3,000 megawatts, and by 2030 it will be about 9,000 megawatts. We then have looked at all the options that there are in terms of meeting that peak demand, and the only most advantageous option that we had was geothermal, and this is why our strategy is purely on geothermal. We are really focusing on geothermal. In spite of the constraints of funding, we hope that we can be able to sort out the funding, and if we are open-minded about it and attracting more investors to come in, we should be able to get investors to invest in the geothermal field.